Сайн байцгаана уу хүнд үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр манай де факто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын тогтвортой бизнесийн холбооны Азийн номхон далайн дид ерөнхийлөгч ноён Давид Моррис оролцож байна.
Давид Моррис дипломатич 2023 онд докторийн зэрэгээ хамгаалж шин нэрний хямрал шин технологийн платформын хөгжлийн тухай номоо хэвлүүлсэн. Австрал болон олон талт харилцааны дипломатич тэрээр олон улсын байгууллагууд, их сургуулиуд, засгийн газрууд болон нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагад ахлах зөвлөхөөр ажиллаж байсан. Нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын тогтвортой бизнесийн Азийн номхон далайн хүмүүсийн дэд дарга, Дэлхийн ногоон байгууллага соёлын харилцааны бодлогын институт зэрэг олон улсын байгууллагын удирдах зөвлөлийн гишүүн.
Хамбогдуул хатан туулгын хөвөөндөх цэнгэг агаартай бүсэд байрлалтай. Хүүхдэд ээлтэй хотхны төлөвлөлт болон эвл амьдралын хэм маягийг эрхэмлэгч та бүхнийг King Tower апартментийн 5 дугаар ээлжийн орон сууцнд урьж байна. Амар тайван амьдрал, аян давтагдшгүй өнгөтэй. Сэлгэр уужим орон зай, хараа баясгах үзэмжит харууц, цэвэр агаар, 5 тухтай орчин, тансаг, давтагдшгүй өнгө төрх. Таныг илэрхийлэх төс хийцлэлтэй King Tower 5 дугаар ээлжийн орон сууцны загварын байранда та бүхнийг урьж байна. King Tower Apartment.
Good evening.
Hello, Jago. It's good to be here. Thank you.
So you are visiting Mongolia now for a few days already. So what brought you to Mongolia? Let us know that.
It's my first visit to Mongolia.
Okay.
I'm delighted to be here. I'm here actually on a European Union funded research project. We have a team of researchers who are political risk experts, and we are looking at political risk in relation to connectivity across Eurasia. And I've been looking for a number of years at the Belt and Road Initiative. That's been a research focus of mine, and also a professional business focus as well, looking at projects of cooperation.
Okay, then very interesting subject. And in your report also you will include by country, or so Mongolia will be inside?
Yes, we're looking at Mongolia, and we're looking at all of the other countries that are along the different routes of the Belt and Road Initiative, or that are connected through these supply chains across the Eurasian continent. And I'm also looking at communications as well as just land trade.
Okay, let's talk about Belt and Road Initiative, at which level it is now. It was announced by the Chinese government 10 years or so ago.
10 years ago,
yes.
That's right.
So,
yes.
So what is what was the main purpose of this project, and how is it going on now?
I think the world has changed a lot in the last 10 years, right?
The last 2 years in particular.
The last 2 years in particular. Yes, I was in Beijing in 2015, and I was there for a number of years serving as a diplomat. And so from 2015 to 2018, I observed up close the Belt and Road Initiative. I went to the first Belt and Road Forum that Xi Jinping convened, and there were, of course, governments from all around the world represented there. And the way that he outlined his vision for a rising China was that China would play a role in the international economy, rather like, I mean, he wouldn't put it this way, but rather like the way Japan did, actually. And that is building connectivity, investing in other countries in order to build stronger supply chains and links to the Chinese economy. So it links China to the world and to the developing world in particular. It demonstrates a confidence in the East Asian development model, which of course has seen the very successful development of Japan and Korea and the ASEAN countries, or most of them, and of course China. It's this confidence that invest in infrastructure, invest in connectivity to the global economy, and take advantage of your competitive advantages. Now, of course, this brings massive benefits to China because of China's scale.
Yes.
If it can build these links, it becomes the hub economy for the world in a sense. And so this raises all kinds of questions for the rest of us.
Which part of this whole total program of this large project is so far implemented?
Well, there have been huge projects implemented in Southeast Asia in particular. I would say Southeast Asia has been a real focus for the Belt and Road Initiative, and this is where there have been investments in all kinds of energy and transport and other infrastructure, port infrastructure and airports and roads and rail and pipelines. And of course we're seeing similar projects in Africa and across Central Asia and other places. But Southeast Asia, I think, has been the strongest area of focus, which makes sense because this is where actually there's the strongest potential for trade and investment development for China as a key focus. And the world has changed in the last few years. And so China really is focusing on those countries that it has strong political relationships with.
To me, all around every country around China, probably except Mongolia, being a part of this huge shifts, right, in economic, etc. So, and the idea was also through Mongolia to go roads, railways, and we don't see particular something is done here.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, I think you have to look at the realities, the geopolitical realities, and I think this is why China has focused on Southeast Asia, where you don't have the same complicating factors. I think the world has become a difficult place, and I'm not an expert on Mongolia, so I won't comment on Mongolia. But as an Australian, I mean, I would say Australia is a very good example of a country that had very close economic links with China, but in the politics of the last few years, that's become hugely problematical. And so there are many issues here. There are many issues of risk and issues of concern that people have about big powers. When big powers get bigger, it raises all kinds of risks.
Even for Australia.
Even for countries that geographically might seem a long way away. But there are issues.
Well, as far as we see now, for example, in Sri Lanka, where they got, also under this program, I understand, they got a lot of loan, they could not pay on time, and their very strategic port is being now rented back, or for 99 years, back to China because they could not pay their debt on time. And also the same thing with Tajikistan, I understand, and part of the land also because they could not pay, also it's kind of under Chinese use. How do you see this kind of
I think this is a very important lesson for all of us, that each nation, each national government, each state has to look very carefully to its own interests. And as you develop agreements that are long-term agreements for debt and for big infrastructure projects, it has to be directed by the government itself. It has to be very clearly in the national interest. And I think we have seen some errors. I think we've seen some mistakes. But I think in most cases we see governments being pretty clear about what their interests are. In many cases, unfortunately, we have corruption and we have bad government decision-making and we have had problems as well. But I think the lesson of Sri Lanka is look to your own interests, look to manage your debt carefully and make sure that you actually have your own national strategy for how you develop your projects. Now, in their case, the government of the day in Sri Lanka entered into that joint venture arrangement willingly. I mean, it was their choice to do that. Many of us externally might look and think, well, we might not do it the same way in our own countries. And so I think the lesson here is, yes, China is becoming more and more of a player in the international economy, as is the United States and as are other players. We do need to look to our own interests as we enter into agreements. And I think that's a critical lesson here, that this is not just about China's interests. China, of course, wants to lend money and wants to have influence, but we need to be guiding our own national development strategies carefully.
Well, this is kind of political risk as well, as you said. Well, probably it is no need to go more to Europe, to the war, etc. Now, I would rather ask you about the connectivity. And this is one of the substantial part of international development. How do you see the connectivity, say, for Mongolia?
Well, I think one of the really big areas of potential for every part of the world, and I'm sure that includes Mongolia, it even includes remote areas like the Pacific Islands region that I've worked for in the past, is actually communications connectivity, because the communications revolution to come, and we're at a very early stage, I believe, of this technological revolution that's coming.
Yeah.
But as we move to this high-speed internet, and as we move to quantum computing and artificial intelligence and a connected internet of things and a metaverse that will replace the internet ultimately, we are going to have instant and global connectivity. And this allied with the shifts in industry and in our international economy towards a green economy and towards different kinds of value chains, there are huge changes to come. And so if we can think about how do we position ourselves in a globally connected communication system that's instant and that actually allows us to work in a very different way from the past, it will change everything. It will remove a lot of barriers that existed to places that may have believed they were remote from major markets. It will change things phenomenally. So I do think the communications connectivity is a critical one. And I'm very pleased to learn in my very brief visit so far to Mongolia that ICT is a really rapidly developing sector here, and there are great areas of innovation here. I really think that's a key to the future.
And we do expect 5G coming to the end of this year, because anyway, sooner or later, everybody will come to that high-speed internet. You just said Metaverse may replace internet. What is that?
Well, we have the technology now, but we haven't yet really developed the applications. But we have the technology to move into a three-dimensional virtual reality. And this is being utilised in gaming and things like that. So young people are aware of this. People, of our age are less aware of it, but it's coming. So in the next 5 to 10 years, applications are going to be built so that we can actually have business meetings in the metaverse. So instead of just a Zoom meeting on 2 dimensions, we can actually be sitting around a table and actually conversing with each other.
Like we are sitting together in the same room.
Sitting together, pulling down data, showing images, taking people off to an international location instantly for a few minutes, showing them a model of an engineering model of a project and actually walking them through a site that hasn't yet been built. All of these things are going to transform our ability to be creative as humans, but also, of course, we're going to see a much more automated future as well. So the automation doing a lot of the work and humans starting to do a lot more of the thinking, creative thinking. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to really rethink how we use technology. We've got to make sure that we put people and the planet at the heart of this new technology, and that doesn't just get turned into something that divides us and is just about selling product to us or surveilling us, as some would argue the internet does. We actually have to think about how the next generation technology that we will actually be immersed in, how do we manage that? It'll raise all kinds of issues about values, about our democracy. So there's a lot to think about. Privacy, security, there's a lot for us to think about. And not many governments are yet really thinking about this. We haven't got the rules. We haven't got the standards. I would argue really at the multilateral level, at the international level, the United Nations, we need to develop some rules around this new technology.
Instead of sitting down and discussing this kind of issues, now we are busy with fighting. And
we're busy fighting.
Yeah.
It's the human condition.
And plus destroying human lives as a result. And many children are victims. You know, they have to migrate inside to other countries. Unfortunately, this is a reality. But however, I was recently in Barcelona at the Mobile World Congress, in which they were talking about the application programming to be standardized so that each application can easily to be mutually kind of integrated somehow.
Yes.
And which will make faster the way we move to the metaverse, right?
It will, and there's a key concept here, which is interoperability. This is a word, when I was a young diplomat about 30 years ago, interoperability.
Okay.
So as a young diplomat 30 years ago, I was writing a book for my foreign minister on UN peacekeeping. And I went to a peacekeeping conference, and we were talking about the need for different military forces when they joined together in a peacekeeping operation. They needed interoperability. So they needed common standards, a common language of operating. In the same way that the aviation industry or the food industry, they have interoperability. This word now these days is critical in technology. We're going to need, as we build this new global technological system that doesn't just allow us to talk to each other, but will connect things. Everything will be ultimately connected to this new technology. We're going to need interoperability. Now, unfortunately, the world is in such a state at the moment that I don't think the big powers are really looking to cooperate with each other. There's much more of a push to separate.
Different agendas.
So there are many problems here for us to solve, I think, in this decade. If we don't get this interoperability, this common language sorted out in the next few years, we're going to find that this new technological world may be two different worlds fighting with each other, which would be a disaster.
We may have good planning or imagination in the metaverse. We can make even perfect building there, which is in reality not yet.
Yes.
But in the reality, you need to shift material things, woods, metals, everything. So still we need that hard infrastructure we are trying to build, for example, in Mongolia.
Indeed.
And yet we have, for example, with China, different gauges, for example, of railroads. And now the transport through Russia is now not very popular anymore. So in that terms, Mongolians are looking very practically on the issue. We have so far made 2 additional new railroads to China, and yet both of them are not yet connected. One is a big difference, even the height, they come like this, standing. So now we need that infrastructure that is connecting these whole things. It will take another 1-2 years. And that's the port issues we have with China. In spite of all our export of coal to China, all we export now, Russia is competing with us as well, Australia. So we all competing for Chinese consumption, which is a normal case. China also produce own coal, yet that connectivity. So in that sense, what we can do so that it goes faster, what is your take on that?
Yeah, well, you're right. We are all interdependent with China. China has now become such a large economy. It's almost the size of the United States economy, and on many measures and in many sectors.
Alone 20% of the economy, and also population almost.
That's
even
right.
More, yeah.
That's right. So really, we must develop a way to make this interdependence work for all of us and for it to be sustainable. And it does mean that as we develop this trade and as we develop these logistical connections, we really do need to use this opportunity. We're in this period of time now where China is putting a lot of finance into building these links. And so I agree with you. I think that the links need to be standardised. We need to rethink things, really. And if we are reshaping supply chains in this decade ahead with a rising China, let's all rethink that. Let's think about how does that work for everyone's benefit. And I think governments and standard-setting agencies do need to be sitting down and working this through to benefit everyone. That we have had a little bit too much politics engaged in all of this in recent times, and standard setting, etc., becomes a matter of national pride. But actually, we're one world, and we're all interconnected. So standards are very important, I think, and I think that goes for whether it's a rail gauge or whatever it is you're talking about.
Or say even EVs. How are we going to charge them in China, or shall we go like electricity plug? Everybody goes with different things, comfortable for other, suitable for other countries. So in that sense, by the way, for the new industries, be it telecom, be it EVs or new planes, are they going to be more standardized? Or it is, again, more problems now? How do you see?
It's a very good question, isn't it? And I think it's a question that's quite relevant to the European Union as well, because the European Union is the most developed regional experiment that we have in the world. I mean, we here in the Asia Pacific have a very sophisticated regionalism. We have a very large free trade area. We have many overlapping regional agreements with ASEAN playing a very central role, but also APEC and also the RCEP, and we can go on. There are many acronyms. But actually, the most advanced one and most developed one is the European Union. Now, we may not be able to or even want to copy them in the Asia Pacific. We have very different circumstances.
But however, when we talk about global standard, there are certain things that the people are traveling to.
That's right. And so it means we can learn from the European Union in some ways. And I think one way we can learn from them is this question of harmonisation and standardisation.
Yes.
They've taken 27 countries, used to be 28, now 27, but they have more members lining up to join.
Yes.
So the European Union probably becomes a grouping of 30 to 35 countries, all with standardised ways of doing business. And so we can learn from that, I think.
Good example is, I understand European Union now put new standard of charging phones, only C, right, type of phones. This one is Apple or Android. You need to carry 2, 3, I don't know how many cables with you. Now instead you just take a one.
Yes, so
I think good start.
So the EU is using its market power to actually say to Apple and the Androids, look, we just want one piece to connect because we want to be developing these standards in the interests of the consumers. So yes, of course, competition means that you end up with different products. But there are times when actually you need policymakers to come in and advocate on behalf of consumers. And this would be my argument about new technology in the future as well. That we really, yes, it's great to have competition and we should have competition, but we also need to be thinking about what are the interests of the consumers and what do we need to standardise, what rules and norms do we need? And so I think that's central to any discussion about the Belt and Road.
It again shows us we are globally, we are on just one place, which is called the Earth. So on the 5G, they also discuss in our World Radio Union or organization, also this GSMA, talk about countries giving particular band of this frequency, 3.5 giga, I think, hertz. If everybody has different diapason, different band, then your phone, with the same system, would not be able to work for other country, right? So in that sense, what kind of it's future look, of course, and what kind of new things to expect?
Yeah, this has been a very contested area. 5G has been very controversial because of the politics that has been injected into it. The leading company in 5G development is a Chinese company, Huawei, and of course that's a company that's been subject to a lot of political claims from the US and other countries, and so there's been a lack of political will to standardise and to set rules in the International Telecommunications Union and in the other standard-setting bodies. I think that's improving, by the way. I think we're seeing more United States and Chinese and other standard setters working together in recent times, but we still do have a highly politicised debate around 5G. I would argue that actually we need to take the politics out of it. Of course, states will
The main arguments of the politicians saying there's security.
There'll always be security issues. There will always be trust issues between states. And of course states are engaged in espionage. They all are. I would doubt that any country of any size isn't engaged in espionage. But I think when it comes to technology, we need to set rules and we need to set standards, and we actually need to treat technology providers in a country blind way, because we ought to be looking at what are the real security risks, not just the imagined ones. We need to actually have systems in place to manage those security risks, because security threats don't just come from states. I mean, they can come from terrorist groups, they can come from some teenage kid in his bedroom.
Yes.
So actually we need to be searching for the real risks, including by states. But I think just blaming one state or just blaming one company doesn't really help us to think through the whole complexity of how we should manage risks in technology.
Yes, yet we need to go forward, because technologies go forward anyway.
Yes.
And when they go, and the transmitting capacity, distributing, transmitting, receiving capacity of this, even these phones are getting stronger, bigger. And we need to have that trust. Otherwise it is big stumbling block of the progress, isn't it?
And we've done it in the past. I mean, even at the height of the Cold War, we developed the International Atomic Energy Agency for nuclear safeguards and for the nuclear industry. We developed standards and rules, and we trusted each other, even though we might not have trusted each other as states. But the nuclear industries were able to work together because we had agreed rules. Same in aviation, the same in food security. So I think we've got to return to that mindset that there are solutions, there are ways to work together and to build trust around specific industries. Of course, we know states will always have difficulties and disagreements, but
in telecommunication in particular, we need kind of MAGATE like this, the atomic agency, which also not only responsible for smooth running, but also kind of, again, like nuclear power stations, taking the security of the whole system.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be a reality soon, you think?
I wish I could say it could be a reality soon.
Okay.
I suspect it's not in the near future, but
Okay.
I still think that those of us who believe in international cooperation, we need to keep advocating this, because the day will come. I mean, we're in a very tough time at the moment. We're in a time of global tension, but it will pass. We've all lived long enough to know that we go through difficult times and we come out of them. And when we come out of this difficult time, we really are going to need to learn how to live together as one world much better.
And yet, you are on the board of this sustainable business network in Asia. What is the main agenda of this network now?
Our main agenda is a Green Deal. You know, we really need to find a way to bring the Asia-Pacific region into the green economy, which is coming. We need to be able to apply the green finance that is there. There's plenty of finance available, but we've got to apply it to projects that really do green our economies and position us so we will be competitive in the new green high-tech economy to come.
I understand, because this war in Ukraine, because all this tectonic shifting in the international politics, I understand we are most probably not going to meet the 2030 global agenda.
I think it's tragic, and I think that we are probably heading to global warming above 1.5 degrees, which does mean that we are going to see huge shifts in the climate in this decade, according to the scientists. I mean, we're going to see many more natural disasters. We're going to see dangers to our food security.
Yes.
So huge problems to come if we don't really address this as a priority.
And it's already now happening many things. After the Turkey, this 2 terrible earthquake, now big flood.
Yeah.
As if that was not enough.
Yes.
And now similar things happening. I'm not talking about the poor North Syrian people who are suffering now. They had no shelter, then it was moved by the flood. So what can we do altogether now to make that 1.5 degrees threshold is there?
Well, we have to move very quickly to green energy and to electric vehicles and to electrifying our industries. And if we can do that quickly in the next few years, we do have the capacity to do it now. We have the technology. Green energy is now competitive, cost competitive. So if we think in the long term, in the medium term even, instead of thinking in terms of short-term returns, if we take a long-term infrastructure development approach, we've really got to be investing in this right now, the shift to a green economy, and we can do it. It is feasible to do. It just requires the political will.
My last question about the Belt and Road. You have been traveling all these Southeast Asian countries now through Mongolia and all the way to Europe. Belt and Road Initiative. Does it help to have this our aim 1.5 degree warming?
I think it must, and I think this is one of the learnings of the last 10 years of the Belt and Road Initiative, was that it really didn't have the green agenda at its heart. It has invested in too many coal-fired power stations and other projects that have actually not been future-ready. But I think those learnings are happening now. I think there is a shift, and I think we're seeing much more of a discussion about a green Belt and Road. Now, it's more talk so far. We need to see it in action. But I think it will. I think in the next decade we'll see. And not only the Belt and Road Initiative, but the US and Japan and the EU and even Australia, all these countries that have infrastructure connectivity projects are looking now to make those programs about building green infrastructure. And so if all of these investors in infrastructure can make this shift, and if we can see the multilateral development banks as well making this shift, as I say, I'm confident. I think it can be done, but I think it requires leadership commitment now. We've got to stop the investment in the old forms of generating power, and we've got to now shift to the new forms.
Well, let it be. In Mongolia now, there will be another, probably called that, power stations, because there is no other way. We don't see yet the other reliable energy source coming. So I don't know, with all this, we need to be yet very careful and really not to be a part of more pollution. We should be a part of less pollution. So
we in Australia have the same challenges you do. You know, we're very rich also in coal and other resources, and so of course there's an argument that, well, why wouldn't we just keep using what we have? But actually, just like you, we're also rich in wind resources. We're rich in solar
nuclear,
resources.
right?
No, we have uranium resources, but we don't have a nuclear energy industry. But
no single nuclear power station?
No.
Is nuclear power station is a solution?
Well, I think in some parts of the world it is.
Yeah, now even Germany.
Yes.
Stop that extinction
yes.
project. Huh?
Yes.
Japan now restarting back the Fukushima, etc. So, well, that's the controversy we face. Anyway, the very lightening conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Waiting for your report on connectivity in Mongolia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Хүндэтгэгчтэй та бүхэнтэй би Давид Моррис гэж яг энэ зам ба бүс хятадын тэр төслийн тухай судалгаа хийж байгаа хүнтэй ярилцлаа. Баярлалаа.
Хам богдуул хатан туулгын хөвөөндөх цэнгэг агаартай бүсэд байрлалтай. Хүүхдэд ээлтэй хотхны төлөвлөлт болон эвл амьдралын хэм маягийн эрхэмлэгч та бүхнийг King Tower апартментийн 5 дугаар ээлжийн орон сууцнд урьж байна. Амар тайван амьдрал, аян давтагдшгүй өнгөтөр. Сэлгэр уужим орон зай, хараа баясгах үзэмжит харууц, цэвэр агаар, 5 дугтай орчин, тансаг, давтагдшгүй өнгө төрөх, таныг илэрхийлэх төгс хийцлэлтэй King Tower 5 дугаар ээлжийн орон сууцны загварын байранда та бүхнийг урьж байна. King Tower апартмент